Hey, peace, everyone. Thanks for being here. One deal it.
Recognize royalty. Recognize it. Recognize royalty. Gotta recognize it. Recognize royalty. Like they ain't got eyes to recognize royalty.
I can feel.
Recognize royalty.
I can see.
Recognize royalty.
Now I recognize
Royalty.
royalty's eyes.
Royalty.
I can see.
Recognize royalty.
I can love
Recognize
again.
royalty.
Now I
I
recognize
recognize it.
royalty.
I recognize
Royalty.
passion. Never just the man with the title in his hand, with the vital in his hand, with the Bible in his hand. You never just the man with the scepter and demand, with the lecture and the stand, with the vector and the candle. Can you understand the grand from the texture of the hand? Hard at work, are you hard at work? Working with the man, don't kiss the ring of royalty. Crown him king, just a thing, letting loyalty ring. Bring frankincense and myrrh and other things. It's gold already blings from the highest that prizes no sins. Recognize the kings overruling commandments with the Trinity and the power it brings when you recognize royalty. I feel it,
I can see.
yeah, I see it.
Now
I recognize now
royalty's eyes.
royalty.
I can see.
I see it.
I can love again.
And I'm in love now.
Now
I recognize your passion.
royalty.
Recognize royalty.
Yeah. So, once again, welcome. Um, Part two of the saga, Who Created Hip Hop. Part one was Disco Fever. So today we're hailing disco because disco seems to be the heart of this hip hop thing. Um, the first show we said hip hop is was formerly known as disco rap, which means they were rapping over disco beats. Um, Started in the streets. It goes along with the typical story we know of. It started in the streets, dancing, and 70s dancing is disco music. So disco is does seem to be the foundation of the movement of the culture. They were just hip hop is just taking the disco stuff, scratching it, cutting the beats, breaking them, break beating, if you will, if that's even a phrase. But it's all mainly messing with disco, and mainly disco. They played a lot of different genres of music, but because dancing was kind of the heart of the culture, disco was the main thing being played, if you will. Um, so we said hip hop culture is a baby or a subculture of disco culture. And so just want to talk some more today about disco and what disco really is. We're going to do the usual wiki, see what we can see, and let's see what it says. It says disco is a genre of dance music and a subculture that emerged in the late 1960s from the United States' urban nightlife scene. Its sound is typified by four on the floor beats, syncopated bass lines, string sections, brass and horns, electric piano, synthesizers, electric rhythm guitars. Um, yeah, so it emerged as a subculture, um, as a genre and a subculture in the United States. But discotheques as a venue were mostly a French invention, imported to the United States with the opening of Le Club, a members-only restaurant and nightclub. So discotheques um, are from France. Ah oui oui. Um, and I think discotheques are a major part of disco culture. So I think that may be another hint that the culture has more foundation in France. Um, yeah, I mean that kind of makes sense. Um, but yeah, at Le Club, a members only restaurant and nightclub located at 416 East 55th Street in Manhattan. Manhattan takes the cake when it comes to disco. Ain't that right though? Manhattan, that's the right borough, you know what I mean, for who created disco. It's so right. It's so proper. Manhattan gets disco, the Bronx gets hip hop. It's appropriate. I don't know. Um yeah, so disco music as a genre started as a mixture of music from venues popular among African Americans, Hispanic and Latino Americans, gay Americans, and Italian Americans in New York City, especially Brooklyn, in New York City and Philadelphia during the late 1960s to the mid to late 1970s. So it started as a genre amongst African Americans and Latinos, and that's important that it's a genre or a culture, because I think those DJs may have played those music so much that they had to kind of create a genre in and of itself. Like they made it a genre, because they were just so into it. They kind of created a culture around it, which kind of I think made a genre out of it. Several dance styles were developed during the period of the 70s disco's popularity in the US, including the bump, the hustle, the Watergate, and the bus stop. Yeah, man, all of this just kind of seems to be making pretty natural sense here. Um, so from During the 1970s, disco music was developed further, mainly by artists from the United States, I'm sorry, from Europe. Well-known artists from the United States and Europe. Well-known artists included the Bee Gees, ABBA, Donna Summer, Gloria Gaynor, Giorgio Morono. Y'all know the names: Barry White, Diana Ross, um, Earth, Wind, and Fire. While performers garnered public attention, record producers working behind the scenes played an important role in developing the genre. By the late 1970s, most major US cities had thriving disco club scenes, and DJs would mix dance records at clubs such as Studio 54, venue popular among celebrities, um, nightclub goers often wore expensive, extravagant outfits consisting predominantly of loose, flowing pants or dresses for ease of movement while dancing. There was also a thriving drug subculture in the disco scene, a drug subculture, because when we did the first video, we spoke about hip hop being a movement, and what was that movement about. And now disco, I think, may also be a movement, because I think a lot of drug use started during that time. So I'm wondering if that same social movement was going on with disco. Um, but that may be for a whole another show. There was a thriving drug subculture in the disco scene, particularly for drugs that would enhance the experience of dancing to the loud music and flashing lights, such as cocaine and quaaludes, the latter being so common in disco subculture that they were nicknamed disco biscuits. Disco clubs were so associated with promiscuity as a reflection of the sexual revolution of this era in popular history. Wow. No, this has to be the birth of hip hop. Drugs and promiscuity. This is the birth of hip hop. We need look no more. Here it is here. um Films such as Saturday Night Fever, Thank God It's Friday contributed to disco's mainstream popularity. This is crazy. Um Disco declined. This is crazy. Disco declined as a major trend in popular music in the United States following the infamous Disco Demolition Night on June 12, 1979, and it continued to sharply decline in popularity in the US during the early 1980s. However, it remained popular in Italy and some European countries throughout the 1980s, and during this time also started becoming trendy in places elsewhere, including yeah, the fact that it remained popular in Italy kind of lets is kind of another hint that it kind of started over there. It's their music. But yeah, but I think Europe is kind of taking claim to disco, and I think disco is definitely taking claim to hip hop. If we just take a look at the etymology of the term disco, It says the term disco is shorthand for the word discotheque, a French word for library of phonograph records derived from bibliothèque. The very word disco is a French word. It's a French word. The word discotheque had the same meaning in English in the 1950s. Discotheque became used in French for a type of nightclub in Paris after they had resorted to playing records during the Nazi occupation in the early 1940s. Wow. Um, yeah, looks like hip hop has a lot more than just disco to hail for the creation of hip hop. Am I am I right? Um, it says disco was started as a way to kind of, I guess, cope with what was going on in with the Nazi and the Nazi invasion or something like that. Isn't that something? Nazism is somehow at the core of hip hop. It is so appropriate. It is so appropriate. Um, you know, that is actually very telling. That when you go down the rabbit's hole, you actually run into Nazism. Not that it's disco was of Nazi people, but just that it's involved, even if it's just a way for people to cope with what was happening to them, and kind of it was their escape. So I'm not saying disco is tied to that. I'm just saying that Nazism is tied to disco. That's all I'm saying. Um, wow, but very interesting. So yeah, so man, it looks like disco is white people culture. Hip hop is white people culture with white people drugs and white people sexual promiscuity. You know what I mean? Black people didn't create the drugs in use, and they ain't create sexual promiscuity. I don't think it started with Black Americans. So you know, it's slipping away from you kind of more and more every day. Um, yeah. So here we are, man. Here we are. I think this is our second seal that has been opened, um, in terms of how far down the rabbit hole and where we end up. We ended up in Europe, in places that we may not have wanted to end up. But it is what it is, man. It is what it is. Um, so again, I hope y'all are enjoying this series. There's gonna be more to come from this series. Um, so I hope you're liking the video. I hope you subscribe. Please hit the notifications. I may go live every now and then. I'm going to be going live to talk about the videos, and just see how you're feeling. Hopefully, you'll come on, and we can have conversations live about what's being said. Um, so man, it's a pleasure to to have started doing this. I'm so looking forward to going down the rabbit hole some more, and just continuing with the adventure. You know what I mean? But let's go. But let's go. Blessings to everyone. Thanks again for being here.
Recognize royalty, recognize royalty, gotta recognize royalty, like they ain't got eyes to recognize royalty.
I can feel,
Recognize royalty,
I can see.
recognize royalty,
Now I recognize
royalty,
royal to these eyes.
royalty,
I can see,
recognize royalty,
I can love
recognize
again.
royalty,
Now I recognize
recognize it,
royalty,
I
royalty.
recognize your passion. Never just the man with the title in his hand, with the vital in his hand, with the Bible in his hand. You never just the man with the scepter in demand, with the lecture and the stand, with the vector and the candle. Can you understand the grand from the texture of the hand? Hard at work, are you hard at work? Working with the man, don't kiss the ring of royalty. Crown him king, just a thing, letting loyalty ring. Bring frankincense and myrrh and other things. As gold already blings from the highest that prizes no sins. Recognize the kings overruling commandments with the Trinity and the power it brings. When you recognize royalty, I feel it.
I can see you.
Yeah, I see it.
Now
I recognize now.
royal to these eyes.
Royalty,
I can see you.
I see it.
I can love again.
Now I'm in love now. I recognize your passion.
Royalty.
Recognize royalty, sunrise royally. Sitting on top of the world, I'm five morally. Status of a king for surely. Morally, we pop dumb things till we stop the impurity. We pop them just for recognition. Listen to the missionary on a mission with the visionary vision. Do you recognize intuition? I reel in men when I went out fishing. I'll tell you why they rocked the boat. Cause they didn't understand what the prophet wrote. What's the conniption? Choose the Jews' crucifixion and refuse recognition at son child's christening in the mix amid some. Insist they fix the system from malarkey back to my monarchy. Yeah, back above me. Don't soil my purple and blue, and I will recognize your royalty too.
I can feel you.
I feel it.
I can see you.
I can see it.
Now
I recognize now.
royal to these eyes.
Your royalty.
I can see you.
I see it.
I can love again.
And I'm in love now.
Now
I recognize your passion.
royalty.
Royalty.